In Titus 2, older women are commanded to teach what is good so they can help younger women love their husbands and children. On today's show, you'll hear from older women who will share timeless, relevant biblical wisdom and personal, profound life experiences to help answer your questions and teach what God says is good so you can be the wife and mother you were created to be. Welcome to another episode of Older Women Likewise.
Good evening, viewers. We are so glad to have you with us this evening, and we are also honored to have these ladies with us tonight to talk with us about raising an autistic child in the Lord. There are many that are struggling with the diagnosis of autism that don't know how they can proceed, and they need some guidance from other sisters in Christ. And so we want to try to help others not feel alone and not feel like they don't know how to do. So we've got all these ladies. Julie is with us. Christine is with us. Beth and Christine have been with us before, but we are welcoming Julie to our program for the first time with the Older Women Likewise. And it's just such a pleasure to have you all with us this evening.
Thank you.
We've got as I said, a very special program tonight. I think this information will be valuable not only to parents who are raising their autistic child in the Lord, but also to other parents who are working with their children. And I think this will give you some really good insights in general to working with children. And it's all different than when I was raising mine, as Beth can tell you. So, and as y'all know, Beth is my daughter, and I'm glad to be working with her again. It's such a pleasure. I want all these ladies to introduce themselves in reference to this particular topic. And I'll start with myself. I am a former teacher and school administrator. So on many occasions, I worked with special needs children and their parents, and of course didn't help them raising them in the Lord, but was trying to help them to work with their child in the situation where they were. I'm also the grandmother of an autistic child, and just have been blessed immeasurably with the diagnosis of autism because I so often see it in myself. And that has helped me throughout my life, for which I'm very grateful, actually. So I would like to then introduce Beth. She's my daughter, as I said. I think she's the most awesome mother in the world. And I got her youngest that the other day. So Beth, tell us about yourself in reference to this subject.
So I have a child who has been diagnosed with autism, an adult child, actually. So we've kind of gone through all of the raising at this point, and we're into the young adult years. And we kind of went through all the autism journey before information was as available as it is now. So we had some different challenges than what people that are raising children may have today.
Well, that's good then. And so you're at a different spot in your working with your child. And that's really great. Julie, what can you tell us about yourself referencing this subject?
Well, I have twin boys. They are 13 years old, and they are both on the spectrum. So I am behind Beth in the process of raising my kids. So I'm interested in a lot that she has to say tonight. I'm hoping to learn a lot from her. But they are just beautiful, smart, wonderful children. Both of my children are. I love having them. Like, as you said, autism has been a blessing in a lot of ways to us. Our house is very calm, and They enjoy the quiet, which kind of helps me enjoy the quiet. They're just really good kids, good natured, and I love the innocence of it all. And so that's been a blessing to us. But the 13 years that I've spent, if I can pass along any information to anybody out there, I'm happy to do that.
That's wonderful. And I know that your insights will also be valuable. Christine, I don't think you have any children. You look too young to have children.
I don't have any kids. I'm just here because I am someone on the autism spectrum, and I also happen to be a former child. So my experience as a former child combined with my experience as an autistic person, I guess I'm here to both learn for if I do have kids, Lord willing, in the future, however, that may turn out. And then also just to share, I guess, my memories, because part, I guess, of autism for me is I have a freakishly detailed memory of my childhood. So if you want to know how I felt about something as an autistic child, I probably do remember, even if it was at a very early age.
Well, we are looking forward to, in our next program, talking about from the aspect or the viewpoint of the person who's on the autism spectrum. So we know we'll hear more from you next time when we continue this discussion later. But I know you'll have some good things for us tonight as well. So we have three main points that we want to discuss tonight. We want to talk about recognizing our child's strengths and the blessings of a child on the autism spectrum. We want to talk about dealing with our own issues of anger and frustration. And we want to talk about the big question of how do you discipline a child who is on the autism spectrum, or discipline at all? How does discipline fit in there? So we want to say God's word, the Bible, is our guide to everything. So we're going to refer frequently to the Bible this evening. And Beth, I wanted to ask you, what scriptures do you think when you consider the blessings and the strengths of a child on the autism spectrum?
I think that the first thing that we need to note, that we need to remember, is that all of us are valuable, and we all get our value from God. We're all his image bearers. We definitely see that from the beginning of scripture. It's pointed out to us. And sometimes I think we lose that. We forget that. So I think that's important. One of the verses that I thought of when I was looking through this was Isaiah 64 and verse 8. But now, O Lord, you are our Father. We are the clay, and you are our potter. We are all the work of your hand. I think that it's really important to remember that. Important to remember that we're all loved by God, John 3:16. And also important to remember that we all have differing gifts and abilities. Recently, I was talking to somebody who was struggling with their self-diagnosis of autism, and they were struggling with, they just said, well, I'm just weird. And I said, you're just different. And if we were all exactly the same, what a boring world this would be. We all have unique abilities and gifts, and we all have something to add.
Exactly. Very good. Well said. I remember thinking of oftentimes in that there are blessings with a child on the autism spectrum. And, I remember a friend telling me that a doctor asked her, well, what are you doing so that you enjoy your child, so that their strengths? Christine, I was wondering, as a person who's been on the spectrum, if you might have some insight about how perhaps your parents related to you in terms of your strengths and blessings.
So, we didn't know I was autistic when I was growing up. there were obviously a lot of signs, but since I was the oldest child, my parents just assumed that children were just like that every time I did something because I was the first one they'd had, which I mean is understandable in a lot of ways. But I've, talked to them a lot about it, sort of looking back in retrospect. And my mom says that she just enjoyed how detail oriented of a kid I was. I was just so interested in tiny details about things. I was just so fully absorbed in the joy of small things like every day. And that she enjoyed that so much, despite the fact that, there were definitely times when I'm sure my behavior was confusing and overwhelming and difficult. What touches me is when I talk to my mom about her memories of my childhood, she really seems to not remember those times so much as she remembers the joy of raising a kid who was so in love with details, which I really appreciate. I love that. I am thankful that my mom sees me that way, but I think she, in a lot of ways has seen me that way for the majority of my life because she's a mom and she loves me. I don't know if that's what you were looking for, but that's some stuff my mom has
good. I think that's, that's good. And, I think a good question is, how can we as parents, how can we keep looking for those strengths and blessings? Can you speak to this, Julie? What do you think about how can we keep looking? Because sometimes the negatives jump out in your face a lot more than the strengths. What do you think?
Yeah, that's true. And especially when you go to school, you're working on IEPs with the other teachers, and a lot of the weaknesses get brought up, and it sort of it hits you, and you start to think more about that. So you have to step back and say, wait, what is it about my child that makes me love them so much? The other thing that's difficult is, I will say this, every single autistic person is their own unique person. Having twins has taught me that very much because they look just alike, but they're not alike. Their strengths and weaknesses are different. And whether they're on the spectrum or not, that would be the case. So, but one of the things that I have found difficult is getting them to try new things, getting them to look for new things to do. So for me, it was a lot of, hey, you're going to do this. Guess what? Now you're going to do this. And putting them in situations to see if it sticks. So when it comes to, let's talk about Bible class, when they got old enough that the children start, saying the prayers in Bible class, of course, my kids were not going to volunteer to say the prayer. So I still to this day will talk to the teacher and say, what day do you want them to say the prayer? And then we write out the prayer. The child and I together will write out the prayer that he's going to say, and then he reads it. And one day, we hope that we'll get to the point of notes rather than every word, and then eventually be able to pray off the top of our heads. But I just put them in that situation and said, hey, guess what? You're going to start leading the prayer, and here's how we're going to work on it. And then you start finding those strengths from that. There may be something that one of my kids has a little bit harder time with the singing out in the auditorium. It's hard for him to read and process the words and say them at the same time as everybody else. So might not push him to be the song leader. That may be later. We're going to work on it, but I don't know that will be the direction that I push him. However, he's in band and plays his instrument wonderfully. So it may develop later. But that's my take on that, is finding their strengths is, in my case, putting them in the situation and with supports to see how they handle that, and then start molding them from there.
That's really good, Julie. Thank you so much. We have a comment from one of our listeners, viewers, Deb Hibbard, who says, yes, that's so true about them being different. They are all unique, which makes it a bit challenging when it comes to TX, and I'm not sure
Things.
what was that. Task?
I believe it's things.
Thank you.
I could be
Knowing
wrong,
I'm
but I think it is.
See, I'm so old, I'm expecting real words, so things. Or this. Knowing how each individual learns helps to tailor things or tasks. So that's treatment, Deb says, treatment.
Oh, okay.
So that's good.
Sorry, Deb.
Okay. Yeah. That makes sense. So it's I think that's really good. We need to do that with all of our children regardless, don't we? Is to find their strength and to speak to it and to work with it. Beth, how about your experience in terms of staying balanced with, you got to work on the things that they're not good at, but you have to at the same time work on and appreciate and enjoy their strengths and the blessings of them. How do parents stay balanced like that?
Well, this doesn't exactly answer your question, but it brings it into my mind.
Okay.
When our child was younger, we decided to go to a parent support group for just an informal group of parents with autistic children. And it was so depressing because the group was not everyone. It was just basically everyone sat around and griped about their kid for like an hour. It didn't help anybody. And it made me so sad.
No.
And I think that as parents, just in general, we're trying to help our kids get better. And sometimes we super focus on the things that are the weaknesses, but we need to focus on that strength as well. For me, I just think some of it is, especially when you're dealing with a child on the spectrum, learning to enjoy the world in a different way than you're used to. Mm-hmm. So mm-hmm. when ours was younger, we would, even if we were going to a museum, that was the thing we did a lot. We would not just buy a ticket for one time because we were going way more than once. The first time was not fun because it was a new experience and it was overwhelming. So we would just zoom through it and then we would go back again and again and again. And I learned to appreciate and notice things that I hadn't before. But I think that if I had just been determined to do it my way instead of doing the thing that appealed to my child, I think that it would have been a task rather than something enjoyable that we did together. That we can't think of the word, learned new things together.
Yeah, new experiences. And instead of it always being, like you say, we have ideas of how we think it's going to be when we take somebody somewhere, whatever it is. And we have that preconceived notion. Grandparents the same way. We think, oh, I'll have grandchildren, it'll be fun, I'll do this, I'll do that, they'll do that. And a child on the spectrum doesn't always do just exactly what you have in mind, but they do different things, other things that are every bit as joyful. And if you are so concerned about, what they don't do, then you lose all the joy of who they are and what they do enjoy. Like Christine said, detail oriented is so much fun when you're, entertaining a grandchild that loves the details of things. And you don't have to make the big things. It's just, I don't even know if that makes sense, but I think I feel that anyway, that there were many times as a grandparent that I would have had a thought, other people are doing thus and so with their grandchild, and I can't do that. That doesn't work out with us. But then there were other things we could do that nobody else was able to do. So I remember one time telling you, we're busy all day long, but boy, when bedtime comes, I don't have to, Grandma, could I have another drink of water? Grandma, could I have another? It was just bedtime was bedtime. That was it. What a blessing for someone older. So
I really feel like
I have found too. Yeah. Beth?
I'm sorry. I really feel like as a parent, some of it is recognizing what behaviors actually are problematic and you can't, that we can't do this thing. But some things are just a little different than you expected as a parent, and that's okay. If your child plays with toys differently than other children, that's just how they do it. You can go with that. There are things you do have to change, but you don't have to change everything. Some things adjust your expectations of what that experience will be like, I think.
And that doesn't necessarily mean lowering your expectations.
Right.
It just means changing the direction of them.
Very good. Christine, any thoughts on that before we move to our topic here?
I appreciate what Julie was saying about making her sons try new things, because I have vivid memories of my mother forcing me to try new things. I was very annoyed with her at the time, and I am deeply grateful as an adult, because I do get very overwhelmed with some new things, and I tend to want to plan it out and sometimes script it out. And I just have a very hard time with some categories of new things. But the reason I'm able to do them as an adult is because my mom taught me how to figure out how to learn to do them as a child who wanted sameness, without making me feel bad for who I was, but just telling me, everyone struggles with doing new things sometimes, so we can work through this together. And it was because she did that I feel that I am able to, I guess, be more flexible as an adult in a way that I appreciate. And so, go Julie. Yeah. I support. My mom did that.
You just made me feel wonderful, because sometimes I worry that my kids will hate me later.
No, I'm glad my mom did it.
But that does speak to the balance, what you just said about how your mom did. By helping them and by her helping you know what the schedule is, or the order things are going to happen, or scripting it out, like you're saying, that helps me and my child find that balance. They know what to expect. I know what to expect. And we just follow our schedule. We were big schedule people at our house. And I was never a schedule person before my children. I was a checklist person. I liked having a list and checking things off. But now it's on the calendar in the order it's going to happen. And that has actually improved my life.
Very good. We have Deb has another comment for us, and we really appreciate our comments. She says, we can't change the external world around us, but we can help our children learn to navigate the world around based on their abilities. And that's so true of every child, not just of a child on the autism spectrum. I mean, we still have to, no matter what, navigate the world based on our abilities. And we can do that. I know as a grandparent, quite often I would tell Beth, so, well, I see our role as introducing your child to new things that we know he's not going to like, and he's going to be mad about it. But then he can be mad at me, and until we've introduced it a few times, and then and I'd rather him be mad at me than at her. So and like Christine said, it's annoying when people push you to do things you don't want to do. I agree. And there's that balance, so isn't it, between pushing your child outside of what they're actually able to do and encouraging them within what they're able to do. And that balance, I think, would be hard to find at times.
That's very true.
Yeah. I think leads us to our next thought that we have is, how do you deal with the anger and the frustration of working with a child on the autism spectrum? I mean, it's hard enough dealing just with yourself, with anger, but that frustration can build, and the anger can build. And what are some ways? And I think I'm going to ask Julie to talk about some of this. You're in the midst of this parenting thing. And so what are you thinking about when you think about dealing with anger and frustration?
So that changes a lot depending on the age of any child, a typical child or a child on the spectrum. So when my children were younger, we had more of the outbursts of anger. We've learned to control them now. A lot of therapists that we've seen, therapies that we've done that have taught us some really good skills to work through that. One of the main ones that has kind of morphed and changed as they've gotten older started out at 5 years old with a little cue card that had a little picture on it, and it said, "I need a break." And they could show, because verbal skills weren't necessarily at the top of our list, they could show that card to the therapist or to their teacher or to me and say, "I'm overwhelmed." Now, maybe I'm overwhelmed because of the sounds around me. Maybe I'm overwhelmed because I'm mad because I don't want to do what you're telling me to do. Or, maybe I'm overwhelmed and I don't even know why. Because that happens in autism. A lot of times, I don't know why I'm overwhelmed. I just am. And so we had this little card that they could show that just said, "I need a break." And that was your get out of jail free card. Whatever's going on, we stop. We go to a certain place at our house. If they were at home, we go to that certain place that's a nice, cozy area, and we take a break. And then after that break is over, and when they were little, we would set a timer. And when the timer would go off, we would say, "Are you ready? Do you want to get up, or do you want to lay there a little longer?" "I want to lay here a little longer." "Okay, let's set another timer." And it has morphed now into, "Can I have some private time?" And we'll be in the middle of something. Maybe we're doing our schoolwork and the frustration is setting in, either frustration at the work or frustration between me and them, because we do a sort of quasi homeschool. Maybe it's frustration from that too. And he can say, "I need a little private time." And he can walk away, take a minute, get himself together, and then come back. And at that point, we can talk. We can either get back to work on schoolwork, or if there's something going on and we need to discipline, then we can actually hear each other. And we can talk, because we've had that moment to calm down our minds and our bodies. So that's been a really big help. A lot of strategies like that for us.
What about you with what you, as you deal with your child on the spectrum? How about anger and frustration?
For me?
Yes, Beth.
Okay.
Is it easier?
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear.
Oh, that's okay. Is it easier? Does the diagnosis make a difference? Being diagnosed,
Yes.
does that help
I think,
or hinder the situation?
I think that helps, because at least the more knowledge you have about what's going on, probably, I'm thinking that makes it easier. That's better. I have a quote. I think it's a really cool quote. It's from a book called The Heart of Anger, by Lou, I don't know how to say the last name, Priolo, maybe is how you say it. I don't agree with all of his theology in the book, but it's a good basic book on how to control anger in yourself and in your child. And one of the things he talks about here is, what is the first rule? He says, question, what's the first rule for teaching a parakeet how to talk? You must have a larger vocabulary than a parakeet. Second question is, what is the first rule for disciplining your children? You must have more discipline than your child. So I think that sometimes with spanking, it's easy to let that get away from you. You should never do that in anger, and not even just with spanking, with any kind of discipline. It's easy to let that become about the parent, for the parent to make it about them. You embarrassed me. You did, I think that we need to, like, with our emotions, we need to remember what we're trying to do. What are we trying to do? We're trying to make this child better.
Right. And it's easy to say things that you can't take back.
Exactly. Yeah.
Right.
And when you do that, we need to apologize to our child. I mean, I'm big on that. I think when we act like, I didn't do anything wrong, like sometimes you need to apologize to your child. If you say something or do something you shouldn't have done. I think it models that for the child.
And if you don't mind me adding, a child with autism that maybe doesn't pick up on the social cues like others do, if I do something and I feel like I was in the wrong, even if it didn't involve my child and he saw me do it, that's a great opportunity for me to say, did you see what I did?
Yeah.
Because here's what happened. Here's what I said or did, and here's why I shouldn't have done it. And I think that helps model for him or her the kind of person that we want them to be. So it's not even just that we're apologizing, but we're teaching social norms through that.
Exactly. Christine, growing up, I'm sure you were in that same anger, frustration for yourself, and maybe saw it in your parents as well. Any comments for us?
I will say there are a couple things they did with discipline that I really appreciate and think made a much bigger difference than they probably knew at the time. Because again, they didn't really understand what was going on in my head. But also, like, a lot of parents don't understand what's going on in their neurotypical child's head. So how unusual really is that? But so I'm not criticizing them for that. A couple things. One of them was they would apologize if they did something they felt they shouldn't have in regards to me. And that made a big difference. But also they were very clear about the rules, because I'm sure, I know every autistic person is not the same, but a lot of us, if the rules are not extremely clear, we do not know how to follow them, and we will break them and not even know we broke them because we did not know what they were, because they were not clear enough. And so I can remember being little, and they literally had the rules of the household listed on a chart. And then they had the appropriate consequences that matched each rule breaking listed on the other side of the chart. And they had a whole other chart for good behavior and then the good consequences of that. And I'm not saying that you need to make a chart and laminate it, because I'm sure you don't necessarily need to do that. But that was the level of specificity that tiny Christine needed to understand the household rules. But because of that, I can remember being a little kid and thinking, wow, my parents are so fair. They're such good parents. They're so fair, because they clearly communicated to me what the expectations were. And so that really helped reduce frustration. Hopefully I didn't get off track there, but.
No, perfect.
I was thinking about what Christine was saying. As a parent, I would think it would be a really good exercise to write down what the rules are. Sometimes as parents, we don't know what the rules are. We just kind of taking it day by day as we go. That's a good exercise as a parent, so you know what your rules are.
And I love that your parents had a list of, here are good things to do.
That's cool.
When I was teaching, I was band director before I had my kids. And when I was teaching, one day I was outside the school and I saw a piece of trash and I picked it up and I heard, I saw that. And I turned and looked, and another teacher, she was laughing, of course, but she said, I caught you doing something good. And that has always stuck with me. I was an adult. I was another teacher, but that stuck with me that she had done that. And so that's something that I've tried to do with my kids, is when I see them doing something, whether it's behavior, as in, proper behavior toward other people, or just doing their chores around the house, whatever it is, I try to say to them, I like how you did this. And then tell them what it was that they did right, because then they know that's what I'm looking for.
Very good. Very good. Thank you. Thank you all. That's great. So I think too, an important thing is, and I think Beth referred to it, is we need to know what our purpose is. The child has done something wrong, that has broken something or in some way, and we have to think, what do I want to achieve in this interaction with my child, instead of just acting on out of anger or frustration. We need to be sure that we do that. That leads us really, and we've got a little while longer to talk to that. I always call it the elephant in the room, discipline. How do you discipline a special needs child? How do you discipline a child with autism? Because honestly, sometimes it looks like the child is just wild and out of control. And I've heard many of people say, you just need to spank that child. And that isn't always the answer. And I'm going to have to leave the program. I'm breaking up real bad. And I'll be back though, ladies. But Beth, would you take over on this?
Okay, sure.
All right.
Okay, so I can't believe she left me. So I know a lot of times with us, we had that experience where people would say, you just need to spank your child more. But I think as parents, number one, we have to be careful, I think, not to be too sensitive to what other people say, because they don't know the full picture, and not worry. Sometimes advice is good to listen to, and sometimes, So, Christine, I know when you and I were talking earlier, you told me about how your parents did the natural consequences.
Mm-hmm.
And I love that idea. And I'd love for you to tell us more about it.
So I have no idea if my parents knew this was even a thing being talked about in parenting circles. I believe where they actually got the idea was just from the book of Proverbs, because the book of Proverbs is full of how every good thing has good consequences and every bad thing has bad consequences. And so they wanted to teach us as kids that that's the way the world worked, and that's the way God generally made the world to work, so that we would be safe as adults. And they even told us that. Like, I knew my parents didn't have rules because they were mean, that they had rules because they were trying to teach me how to be safe as a kid and when I grew up. So every time there was a rule broken, there would be the punishment had to fit what the rule was that you broke. So if you were refusing to do your schoolwork because you were trying to sneak, I don't know, a toy into your little schoolroom or something, you would lose privileges with that toy for the next day, etc., and so on. And it's not that they never spanked us, but it wasn't real common, because that was for things where the punishment fit the crime. Like, if little Christine got real mad at my little brother, and we're very small, and I bite him, then I was going to get a spanking because I inflicted pain on another person. So I had to be reminded that's not fair, and so on. And even at the time, as a kid, I was thinking, you know what, I really deserve this. That makes complete sense, which maybe that's the autism. I don't know. But in my mind, I thought, this is very logical. I'm not going to do that again. And so that was more their approach, that everything had to have a reason. And it was because they wanted the consequence not to just make us feel bad, but to help us understand something about how God made the world.
Yeah, I think that's such a great way to discipline, and like you said, it teaches us about the world around us as we get older.
Beth, I remember once when we had an issue of who's in charge in our family, not between you and me, but I mean with our child, that it was like, okay, there's an order here of authority. And I really liked the way that you laid that out. And it seemed like expressing that to a child who's logical, with logical thinking, makes really perfect sense. And I don't know if you know what I mean, or
I don't remember. I'm trying to remember it, and I don't.
I just remember you saying that you told your child, I don't spank you because I'm mad. I don't spank you because I'm embarrassed, or I don't discipline you because I discipline you because God disciplines me. And so that is my job. I mean, you really laid out that authority of God. I think that's so important in raising a child in the Lord, is to, it's not just because I said so, it's my house and you do what I want you to do, but rather this is what God tells us.
Another thing we did, and I'm going to try to explain this right. I'm not sure if I'm going to get it out of my head the right way. Another thing that we did was just in rule setting, we would say these rules, they're basically almost like two sets of rules. These rules are from God, and these rules you have to do while you're in our house. So I think that made more sense for my child, because going to bed at 8:30 is not God's law. But if you're in your parents' house, that's what you need to do then. But to understand that both of those rules, they're different. I don't know if I expressed that the right way. I hope I did.
Yes.
I think it really helps a child to understand the natural rules and the artificial rules. Christine, you know what I'm saying? That some things you do because that's what God tells you to do. To me, that's a natural rule.
Yes.
But an artificial one is, okay, in our house, we sit down at the table and eat a meal sitting at the table. We don't sit at the living room or whatever. That's an artificial rule.
Yeah.
Julie, comment? We hadn't heard from you yet on this. And I know, again, you're in the midst of it, I know.
Waiting my turn. So one big thing with discipline in our house, and I kind of alluded to it before, is the positive side of things. And when I think of disciplining, I'm not even necessarily thinking of I've done something that breaks the rules and I'm going to be punished, but also just training. So in training a child to do what we want them to do. So we use a lot of positive reinforcement for the more training side of discipline. And that has been very helpful with autism, because when we're upset, when we're angry, we're not hearing what's being said to us. When we're just still mad because we're being punished, we're not even always hearing what's being said. And for my kids in particular, and I know it's different with different people on the spectrum, the processing time between words and action, or between words and understanding of those words, is pretty slow. So I have to think to myself, if I'm rapid fire discussing something with my kids, rapid fire is not helpful to them. But back to the positive side of things, in training them, instead of using some of those techniques, we actually will set up a reward chart. We don't do that as much now that they're older. We don't really need the chart, but we'll set up a reward chart, or some way of keeping track of where we are on things. Every time you do this, you get another tally mark, or every time you do this, you get a star. And that works, of course, really well with little kids. As they get older, though, because we did that when they were little, they can do that for themselves now. So I have one of my kids that had a habit that he was trying to kick. And so I just set him up had these little balls, you could use marbles, whatever. I set him up with a bowl of those, and over here was the basket he was going to put him in. And I said, you set your own timer for every time that you've gone this long without doing this habit you want to kick, then you put one over there. And when it fills up, we made us a list of things that he wanted, to go to the arcade, go get ice cream, whatever it was that he wanted. When you fill it up, you come and tell me. And he's able to monitor himself in that now. But that started when he was little. And so, and you can use that for habits you want to develop. I want to make sure I get my reverse memorized. So I give myself a token for each sentence of that scripture that I have memorized. It could be any number of things, but it's not just a reward, it's tracking. It's them seeing their progress. They can see that I'm getting more and more of my memory verse memorized, or that I've completed one page of my Bible class material, another page of my Bible class material, or my homework for school, whatever it may be. And that has been really helpful for us to think of discipline more as training than as punishment.
Mm-hmm. I think that's a great way to look at it. I mean, that's the whole point of discipline, after all, is to any parent who's teaching their child and training them. You train your children so that you discipline them so they can discipline themselves. And as you say, more training than it is punishment. Christine, any thoughts on this you wanted to share with us?
So the whole chart thing is very popular with a lot of parents, including parents whose kids are not on the spectrum. But I don't know that I would have much to share about it, because as a child, that didn't really work on me very long. After I turned about 3 or so, I don't remember anyone using on me anymore. And if they had, I doubt it would have worked, because in my mind, there was no logical connection between the reward and the task I was doing. And so therefore, I didn't understand why we were artificially connecting them. But I know that that's not the case for every person. That doesn't work on me as an adult either. I have to set up different systems.
Well, and that's a really great point, is that I have the viewers know I have this thing about threes. You do something 3 times. If you do something 3 times and it doesn't work, don't keep doing that, you know. And if you try this chart thing and it just isn't working, abandon it. There's no, you're not required to do that. There's no one way. I can remember with Beth's child that my reward and punishment would be, okay, grandma minutes. And if the child was not doing the way that whatever the rules we had set about as the behavior in this situation, I said, well, you're going to lose a grandma minute. No. And I said, well, you better behave then. And my husband says, what's a grandma minute? I said, I have no idea, but it works. And so I don't know what
that would have worked on me, ironically.
Isn't that funny?
Well, and one of my kids is great with the self-monitoring, like we were talking about. He will come to me and ask for that. And the other one does really well with it, but he doesn't seek it out. So, that's 2 different directions that they go with it. And, we'll keep following whichever path works better for them. Yeah. So everybody's different.
Absolutely. And we read the scriptures, spare the rod, spoil the child, but that does not mean that every child needs to be whipped, that every child needs to be spanked. Beth,
well,
speak.
And
I see it in your eyes.
I know. Well, that's my thing. A lot of people say that, and I know the scripture does say that, and there is a proper place for it. But we have a 16-year-old and they don't do their chores, we don't spank them. We take their car keys because it's appropriate for that child. And so I think making the punishment appropriate is important, obviously. So.
Definitely key. That's right. Any other thoughts that we have? I think we've kind of covered all the thoughts that we already had listed that we wanted to talk about. Julie, anything else that you'd like to add tonight?
The only other thing that I thought of on the parent side of autism is how it affects the parents themselves and how that changes our relationships with our friends and the things we're able to do and participate in at worship. My husband had to step back from a few things that he had been doing in worship to sit with me because, well, I had 2 2-year-olds that both, both were pretty busy. And so it changed our relationship. It changed the way we did things at church and the way that, of course, we were raising them, and the stress that it has on a marriage. You really have to be a team, and you really have to come at this together. You have to talk about how we're going to discipline and what's okay or not okay, because there are some things that you just have to let go of that you really want to say, you're not allowed to do that. But then, like y'all were saying earlier, you have to say, what's my purpose in this and what is my final goal? And you both have to be on the same page with that. And so that's difficult sometimes. And you, with your friends that do have typical children, it changes your interactions with them. It changes if you're able to go and do things with them the way you used to do that. How are they accepting your child? We've been fortunate to keep wonderful friends around us, but still not able to always do everything that they do. And you have to learn to accept that and learn to find other ways to enjoy your friends sometimes.
Those are excellent points. And I tell you, I have things I wanted to say, and I think the others do too. We're going to save this for our next discussion on February the 19th. These ladies will be back. We're going to talk about raising an autistic child, but we're going to talk about it from the perspective of a person on the autism spectrum, whether it's a child growing up or an adult. And we've had communication with some women who have autistic husbands. How do I deal with them? What do I do? How can I help them? And Julie, I think that the concept and the topic of the greater family, the larger family, and the family of God, how do we all work together so that these children and these adults are in the Lord, and we continue in the Lord, and that we don't discourage them out of the church or discourage them away from God. And I think that would be an interesting discussion for us for the next time, because we've gone a long time tonight, but it has been wonderful. And I wanted to thank all of you so much for being with us tonight. And Beth and Julie and Christine, thank you so much for all the work you've put in on this. And I'm just really looking forward to our next discussion, because all of our children are a blessing from the Lord, regardless of their strengths, of their weaknesses. And we want to just enjoy all of our children and do our best to raise them according to the Lord, or as we say, in the Lord. In closing, I want to encourage our viewers to watch Older Women Likewise every Thursday at 8:00 Eastern, and also to watch Answering Religious Error on Tuesday nights at 8:00 Eastern. Wonderful lessons being presented there. On Wednesdays at noon, there's a Bible question and answer program that you will benefit from as well. So please be sure to watch that. Every day, Monday through Friday, Mark Dunnigan does a podcast, the Daily Answer podcast. And it's a wonderful series of podcasts that I know that you will all enjoy. So please be sure to subscribe, to follow that podcast, and to listen to it on a regular basis. That's the end of our program for tonight. But I want to again thank all of our viewers, and come back again on February the 19th. I think it's right. So we would love to see you then. Thanks so much, ladies, and I'll tell you all good night.
Thank you. Bye.